This lecture is for Chapter 7 of the Odyssey. We start Chapter 7 with Telemachus finally returning home to his mother, who's waiting with her servant Euryloca, and a prophet by the name of Theoclymenus. Now, remember, Telemachus had been warned by Athena coming home that the suitors were going to try to kill him. Penelope knew this, so she is, of course, overjoyed and glad to see her son. Now, Telemachus tells her all that he learned about his father, that he had been held captive by the nymph Calypso, and at this point of time, this seer says that he has gleaned more information about Odysseus' whereabouts through an omen. So he must have had some kind of a vision, some kind of a dream, some kind of something that lets him know that, in fact, Odysseus is already in Ithaca and preparing to take back his kingdom. Now, obviously, Penelope hopes that this is true, but she's still hesitant to believe that her husband is coming home. Now, the scene flashes to Odysseus and Aeneas. They're coming into town where they meet another servant. His name is Melanthius. Melanthius is a goat herd. Now, I want you guys to catch how openly hostile this servant of Odysseus' household is. He first verbally insults Odysseus, proceeds to kick at Odysseus, we'd call that aggravated assault, and then threatens to sell Odysseus into slavery. That's a crazy, crazy increase in violence towards Odysseus. Now, Odysseus pretty much ignores this young gentleman, gives him a hard stare, wanting to challenge him, but too smart to take the bait at this point. So now, as they approach Ithaca, Odysseus and Aeneas are close enough to hear one of Ithaca's famous bards singing, and they decide to part company. Aeneas warning Odysseus that the suitors will mistreat a beggar walking without protection, worrying about him. As they talk about this, Odysseus shares that he's endured much during war, and because again, Aeneas doesn't know his identity. And Odysseus kind of stops mid-thought as he notices a dog lying on the side of the road. Odysseus asks Aeneas what dog this is, and we learn that it's his dog, Argo. That this dog was once Odysseus' favorite hound, a great tracker, but nobody has cared for the dog since his master's quote-unquote death. Argo, hearing Odysseus' voice, his ears perk up. And as things seem to be going well for Odysseus, we might assume that we're going to have a glorious reunion of dog and man, and rather than that, some situational irony happens and Argos dies. Horrible, horrible. Now, after 20 years, Odysseus finally returns home, only Telemachus knowing who he is. Now, Odysseus begins roaming around his town and castle, testing the suitors to see how they're going to respond to a beggar. Some of the suitors are nice to him, others are cruel, but remember, their fates are already sealed by Athena. They are all doomed to die. Some of the suitors physically try to harm Odysseus. We see Antinous here taking a chair and smashing it over his back. Odysseus, though, seems to have no effect on this ancient beggar. One of the suitors stands up for Odysseus and points out that he might even be a god in disguise to pass judgment on the suitors. Antinius replies that the old beggar should just eat in silence, or he's going to have him tortured and killed. Now, at this point of time, we see Penelope, who's looking at this old beggar and wondering whether or not this man may have traveled much and perhaps has learned of Odysseus' fate. Aeneas confirms these suspicions and tells her that this old beggar actually has news of Odysseus and that Penelope will want to hear his story. Aeneas invites Odysseus to meet with Penelope, but Odysseus says that he won't be able to make it until sunset because he's too afraid to walk through the suitors. So as he sits in the doorway trying to eat in peace, not bugging anybody, being left alone, Iris, one of the servants of the suitors, slams a plate over his head. Now Odysseus knows that he's drunk and warns that he will teach him a lesson if he does not stop threatening him, despite his age. Now, Iris becomes enraged by this. And Antinius urges them to fight and offers an incentive and reward for the winner. The winner, either Iris, this servant of another suitor, or this old beggar, will be able to sit at the table with them and will be well fed. Meanwhile, the loser will be thrown out of the city. Odysseus admits that it would be crazy for an old man such as himself to take on a strong younger man, but he blames his hunger. His hunger drives him to do things that may not seem wise. Odysseus removes his humble rags and reveals his heroic warrior physique underneath. Apparently, Athena did not give him a dad bod, just a dad old man face. The suitors are shocked by his strength, and Athena, in secret, adds to his strength and makes him even stronger. Iris begins to realize maybe he is bitten off more than he can chew, and begins having second thoughts. But Antinius urges him to fight and mocks him for being afraid of a broken down old beggar, to which Iris responds, he fears no man. Which, if we think about him fearing no man, this is actually a hilarious pun for us, knowing who no man actually is. If you guys recall, back when Odysseus met the Cyclops Polyphemus, he introduced himself as no man. So who does Iris fear? No man. Odysseus. Now, this fight is probably one of the best fights in the entire book. Odysseus calmly blocks Iris's initial blow, and then with one blow, open-handed, slap right across the face, knocks him out cold. And skadoosh, down Iris goes on his face, much to the surprise and shock of everyone present. And then Odysseus, in a fitting picture of justice, drags him out by the ankle, props him up against a rock, and gives him instructions to keep the dogs and the pigs away. He also leaves him as a warning that if he starts any more trouble, he will not get off so easily next time. Now, coming back in, the suitors actually cheer and thank him for dealing with this arrogant servant of a suitor. Now, there should be some foreshadowing that we see taking place with Odysseus taking out the trash, if you will. Antinius gives him food as promised, but only enough to make good on his promise. And we meet another suitor, Amphinomus, who's a kind suitor. He actually has a father that knows Odysseus. And Odysseus warns him that the suitors are wasting another man's kingdom. And if Odysseus turns home, he better hope that he is gone. Otherwise, he's going to return the debt he owes in blood. Now again, is he going to escape? No, for Athena has doomed him to fall. Now, she's also inspired Penelope to show herself to the suitors and to mingle with them. She's obviously sad to know that Telemachus has allowed their guest to fight with a much younger man. Now, Telemachus apologizes, but reminds her that it did not go as the suitors wanted, and the stranger never appeared to be in any danger whatsoever. Some suitors come up and flatter the queen in her beauty, but she replies that all of her true beauty faded when her husband left Troy. She does finally admit that soon she will have to marry one of the suitors unwillingly, but if her husband were there, she would be respected instead of oppressed in her own home. Now, we know that one of Odysseus' main reasons for going into Ithaca in disguise is that he wanted to know if Penelope still loved him. He did not want to make the same mistake as Agamemnon and go home to whom he thought was a loyal wife and instead get killed. Now, Antinous reminds Penelope that they will not return to their normal lives or even leave until she has married one of the men. Odysseus, still in disguise, warns them that they will try to flee this house in fear when Odysseus returns. And again, we see one of the suitors throwing a chair at him for dare speaking these words. Odysseus appears to cower in fear, pretend, at the knees of the other suitors, and Telemachus tells everybody it is time for y'all to get to bed and to tuck in for the night. So things are starting to get crazy. He's trying to defuse the situation. Now, that evening, when the suitors have either passed out or fallen asleep, Odysseus instructs Telemachus to steal their weapons and armor and say he was worried about them fighting and hurting each other after parting as much as they have. And at this point of time, Odysseus goes up into the house to meet Penelope and to judge her loyalty to him. On his way, he encounters one of his wife's servants who fails her test as she yells at the disguised Odysseus and threatens him. Odysseus does not want servants that cannot and will not treat guests properly. And finally, after 20 years, Odysseus and his wife reconnect. Penelope greets the disguised Odysseus suspiciously, fearing that his story is too good to be true. She knows that there's something different about this man. She asks his name, where he's from, who his parents are, and Odysseus expertly dodges her questions and instead talks about himself. His description of Odysseus, the clothes, the brooch he was wearing, a brooch would have been something they would have worn on their clothes, are proof that he does indeed know Odysseus. And Penelope grieves that he ever had to leave to fight for Troy. And at this point, Odysseus interrupts her and says, Odysseus, he's alive, and he is on his way home to you. In fact, he sent me ahead, and he will return at the end of the next month or the beginning of the next. Now, obviously, Penelope wishes this were true, but she cannot bring herself to believe that Odysseus is alive. She instructs her servant, a faithful servant, Euryloca, to come and wash the beggar's feet as a token of respect, both for his story and worrying that he's the same age as Odysseus would be, just wants to treat him well. Euryloca is a smart woman. As she's washing beggar Odysseus' feet, she's looking at him. She tells this stranger that she has never seen someone so similar in voice and look of body and feet as that of her old master. Odysseus replies that people often mistook the two of them when they were together. He's trying to cleverly evade this comparison until the truth comes out and Odysseus discovers a scar on Eurylocha discovers a scar on Odysseus's leg that she knows. Years ago, Odysseus had gotten a scar out hunting wild boars, and he was gored. Odysseus covers her mouth to keep her from blurting out his secret before it's time. And she promises that nothing will make her reveal his return. So, for some reason, Odysseus's magical disguise from Athena was not 100%, right? We've seen previously his body wasn't maybe as changed as we initially thought, nor are these scars changed. So perhaps this is merely done in the wisdom of Athena, or perhaps it's just a way of moving the story along, right? So, the next morning, or maybe even that evening. Yeah, this is still that evening. Penelope had had a dream of an eagle swooping down from a mountain and killing 20 geese before flying away again, and asks beggar Odysseus to interpret the dream for her. He tells her that the eagle symbolizes her husband returning after 20 years. Now, she's worried that the dream may be a false omen, so she plans to hold a tournament of axes and archery, recalling that Odysseus used to set up 12 axes in a line and then would use his bow to shoot an arrow through all 12. It was like a trick shot he used to do to entertain people. Her plan is to use this feat to determine which of the suitors she will marry. Now, beggar Odysseus, still in his disguise, tells her not to worry and that her husband will return before any suitors have a chance to string his bow. He then tries to go to sleep for the night, but the sound of the suitors parting keep him awake. As he looks out the window, he sees the men fraternizing with his servants. The servants who should be loyal to Penelope are instead betraying her by consorting, if you will, with these men. He doesn't understand why this bothers him so much when he remembers that he had to suffer through much worse than this on his return home, but something about this scene is killing him inside. Athena appears to him, and he confesses that he is worried he will not be able to kill all the suitors single-handedly and avoid their friends and family when these people come to take revenge on him. Athena reminds him of all that she has protected him and will continue to do so. As Penelope is in another room, she is praying that the Olympians would take her life rather than let her marry a man less than Odysseus. She laments that she cannot even dream, go to bed in peace, hearing the party that's happening down below. She prays for a sign from Zeus, and at the same time, one of the servants prays to Zeus. And Odysseus is also praying, and a bolt of lightning strikes in the distance. Odysseus knows that the Olympians, the gods, are on his side, and was glad. And thus ends chapter 7.